Hey Collective, it's Al coming to you with a standalone piece that will be released just probably for the YouTube audience. But something that I've been kind of sitting on that I kind of only referenced in the last piece I did for LinkedIn that had a video accompaniment to it, where I mentioned that I was going to do a separate video talking about 2025 and kind of some of the energy that I'm reading. And that hopefully will be of service to those of you who are meant to see this. And essentially what I wanted to do before I did the video and why I took such a long break between recording that one and then doing this one was because some of the energy was a little bit confusing because it was sitting in a headspace of worst case scenario, and I didn't feel like that was the actual answer or what I was supposed to be delivering. So I had to shake off some of the energy that had come from the previous week, from some of the stuff that I'll be talking about that is heading towards the collective towards next year. And so basically what I came to realize is that before I even begin with 2025 and the reset that is happening once again as we head into that year, I wanted to clear my own energy and kind of speak to the fact that sometimes when you're going through the thick of something or you are experiencing what they might consider spiritual attacks or you're just dealing with your own shadow, sometimes you have to know your voice well enough to know to reserve your energy and not speak to something while you're in the thick of something so as to not pollute the information that you are supposed to be parlaying towards the greater collective. So having said all that, 2025 is a very interesting year. It's kind of the results of the past 5 years, right? Starting from 2020, we had a reset going from 2019 to 2020, and a lot of things have happened since then. And so as we head into the end of this year, it's setting up a domino effect that will be taking effect all throughout 2025, and what I could best describe as the come to Jesus type of thing for those of you who understand kind of more the spiritual side of where we're heading. Right, with all of the melee and all of the things that are going on and kind of the sheer corruption and hypocrisy and such vitriol and hatred being spread so quickly throughout our airwaves, we're finding ourselves in a very precarious situation where we don't really understand or know what's on the other side of the veil of 2025 because some of the things that need to happen towards the end of this year have not yet transpired. So, what I wanted to say is 2025 is going to be one of those years where it's going to be a judgment call. For those of you who are more adept or probably of the higher vibration, you're starting to feel this kind of vote coming. Something that's kind of outside of human terms, but something from a higher perspective that is transpiring at the end of the year, kind of coinciding with the American election, but not necessarily related to it, but rather a byproduct of kind of the overall canvas of life. And some of the things that are on the block are basically cleaning house from a much higher perspective and kind of how that might play out. And so I'm supposed to speak to it, but in a way that isn't downplaying it or that isn't fear-mongering, because there are a lot of timelines that have not yet come to pass, and there are a lot of variables that have not yet taken shape. And so until those thought forms become crystallized and become grounded into the earthly plane, it's a little premature to make it sound like it's going to be the end of everything, right? Because that would just be ridiculous. There's a lot of hope still left in our collective, and we know that the great architect works miracles, so don't count the big dog out until he actually shows his hand, and right now that has not happened. But going into it, understand that there are still timelines and people and tribes that have not yet come together for whatever reason, basically I would say because of divine timing. And we understand how those delays and kind of that can make people feel a little uneasy. And I'm just saying, as we go into 25, don't count us out yet. Don't count light out, because light always transmutes darkness. So understand that it's still playing its hand, just privately behind the scenes and not so much in front of the camera or in front of the world yet. So as I begin, just be very conscious of that, right? Have that self-awareness to understand that nothing is written in stone yet for what happens after 2025. But basically what I wanted to speak to is kind of the things that I was going through in what we would call the purification era. And what I mean is many of you are coming to understand that you are going through physical, mental, and spiritual cleansing and purifications. And a lot of it isn't easy for the collective, especially for those of you who are at a graduate level, if you will, of the school academy, or are a teacher or some sort of healer or some sort of aid to humanity at this most crucial time. Understand that it's not easy to do what you're trying to do, and it takes a lot of purification of the mind, body, and soul. And so some of the things that we're going to be feeling, especially as we head into the end of the year before the great cosmic vote is done and before the boss releases the information as to what is going to happen and what are the consequences in 2025, Be advised that you're going to be going through some different spiritual ascension symptoms and some sort of things that you may not be necessarily prepared for, because nobody really talks about it because people think you're fucking crazy. But I don't give a crap. So essentially what I've been experiencing for myself, and I'm going to speak from an owl perspective so you understand what I've gone through, because I tend to be a little bit ahead of the curve just so that I'm more conscious and more present for when it actually affects a greater collective. Okay. So I started with the physical purification, and one of the things that I noticed was I started to really feel the cosmic effects of solar flares. And one of the things that I'm going to just forewarn everybody for 2025 is there are going to be 3 major events. Whether they are positive or negative is not necessarily known yet, but one of them is going to be related to a solar flare of mass proportion. And one of the things that I experienced in my purification was almost a sense of radiation, a large dose of radiation hitting the body, and kind of the consequences that I felt for myself. And essentially, it was like 8 hours of me throwing up and a lot of pain, and then it went away. It was like, it wasn't even a bug. It didn't even last more than 8 hours. It was suddenly, I was at work, I was minding my own business, I was not out of alignment, I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, and suddenly I got really, really sick. And it got to the point where I had to go home. And as soon as I got home, I proceeded to then throw up for 8 hours, and it felt like a large dose of radiation. It wasn't food coming up, it was just me purifying the body. But in the process, what I had realized is I called the paramedics, because obviously I was really, really in bad shape, and they basically assumed that it was a bug that would be gone in 24 hours and there was no need for me to panic. So having sought the medical attention, I went ahead and just got rid of all of it. And basically the only hint I can give you is remember why cats lurch up when they are doing hairballs, and maybe you'll have a better run of it if it comes to you that way. But during that process, I realized that it was part of a physical purification. And I started to get the inclination and kind of the direction that I needed to then look forward towards 2025 with a clear mind about how I'm going to purify the body. Meaning fasting, I'm not a big faster, but watching what I put into my body, being very conscious of any alcohol or no drugs whatsoever, nothing that can alter the natural state of the body, because I couldn't help but see these solar flares that have been flaring up over 2024 as dad or mom on the front porch flashing the porch lights that it's time to come home. And I couldn't help but see that very clearly, and I couldn't tell if it was a personal thing, like maybe my time was coming to an end or whatever it was, and kind of dealing with the consequences that come with that type of thinking, and realizing that I have no fear of that, so whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But as it progressed, and as the then mental part started to be purged as well, I started to realize it was a bigger concept than just myself, that it was affecting the all. And so what I wanted to say was, be very clear on what you ingest from here to the end of next year into 2025. And I would highly suggest, even those of you who enjoy an occasional cocktail, be very clear that any toxins that we put into our body are going to play a part in how well we do and whatever happens in 2025. And that's not to scare you, but rather to make you very conscious of your diet and make you realize that some foods are better for the body than other foods, and any type of drugs or anything that's not medically required, that is not needed for life, may have a consequence to it. And there's nothing scary about it, it's just common sense. When you overdo any indulgences, when you overindulge, I should say, you put yourself in a situation where it might actually be of detriment to you. And just understand that that's going to be a major factor in what happens in 2025 with the mass event, okay? The second thing is to understand why we know that this was kind of coming, and kind of more of the spiritual and scripture context about why we've always understood when it says that if you're not in a purified state as a soul and the boss looks at you, that you can be engulfed, right? And it kind of comes down to something I noticed with solar flares in general, which kind of reminded me of like somebody with a magnifying glass looking at an ant pile. And if you're not in proper alignment, you might actually get, right? And that's not to be fearful, that's just reality, right? Like, you can't stand before the great architect if you're not in a purified state and whole. And so it's just something to be aware of, that what you ingest into your body may play a part in how that plays out in the general population. Because I couldn't help but notice that some of the negative consequences that might happen if this all goes tits up, which is a possibility. I'm not doing a worst case scenario because I still believe that there's a lot of hope, and more than likely it's not going to happen in a bad way. But let's say there's something that consequences come from the sheer amount of hatred and intolerances that are being spread throughout the world, then maybe there might be a consequence for the greater collective, because we are being graded on a collective scale. To understand that, we do have to talk about some uncomfortable things, and one of them would be plagues and kind of consequences that come from the physical purification of a general population. and understanding that it's not always just the corrupt and evil beings of our planet trying to make money off of the medical profession, that sometimes things actually do break out from a higher perspective in order to purify the body, and it's not always the most pleasant of experiences. And looking back throughout history, if it happens again, the more purified your state and the better your body is equipped, in better shape and better mental stability, and kind of having that balance within the oneself to have been tempered, that type of thing really goes a long way in order to help you survive and thrive, as opposed to go down with the rest of them who may not be paying attention to all the signs. And so it's just important for me to be very clear with you guys that it's important, regardless of what happens after the veil is pulled up in 2025, that it's very important for you to be as purified as you can. So, not being a medical professional, I'm not going to tell you how to do that. That's something you seek with your doctor, your natural healer. What I'm going to say to you is that it's very important to watch what you put into the body once again, and especially staying away from any type of large overindulgence of alcohol or any type of drugs, because they dehydrate you and it may not be very helpful if you get like a strain of something and you have to fight through something in order to purify the physical shell. Right? And then with that concept, there is a reason why people are more afraid of the P word, and that's usually because of the fact that when those things happen, it's kind of out of your control in that moment. So the best thing I would advise is to be forewarned that if something like that happens, the healthier and stronger your core is, the more likely you're going to be fine. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. But having said that, what I will say is that it doesn't just stay with the physical, right? Because once you go through that purification portal, you then have to purify the mind. And I'm just going to tell you how it went about with me, because it has something to do with what I call the 10 days of darkness and kind of the way it came crashing down all at once, and how, for whatever reason, correlated with my birthday and stuff like that. So I turned 46 on July 1st. And I had already put my 2-week notice at work that I was going to be leaving there because I felt a calling that I needed to move on to something else, and that I just needed to trust my gut and do it. But what ended up happening is that 2 weeks ended up extending to a month because they couldn't find a replacement for me. I didn't want to be a dickhead and leave them. So I did the due diligence and the responsibility thing of staying until it was done. But during that, I was supposed to have ended that job on my birthday. But because I stayed those additional 2 weeks, I ended up contracting COVID and right around my birthday. And it kind of took me out for a little bit because it wasn't like the initial strain that we got, which was nothing to me. This one was a little bit more hard hitting, and I realized it had more to do with the mental purification process. And what I mean is that it kind of correlated at the same time with my birthday, with me leaving that job, and then with all of the things that kind of are mainly that kind of come as a result of such decisions, all happened to correlate with the birthday, and then also with the fact that I went into the 10 days of darkness and then was going through the purification of the mental state all at once. And it kind of happens like that. And most people would consider it a tower moment, but I could care less. This particular strain was really rough on the body. And it wasn't like my whole body, it was just a lot of head congestion, and I just felt like I don't know how to say it, like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. Like I felt mucusy and just gross and the worst possible state I could be in. And there was a lot of banter that came with it. And what I realized was that I was so focused on the fact that I was being attacked spiritually during the worst state of my physical body, that I started to blame others instead of realizing that it might just be me looking at my shadow and my shadow being purified and all of the gunk being brought up to the surface. And instead of looking outwardly, I looked inward, and it really helped me. But it kicked off something that I called the 10 days of darkness, which I don't know where I came up with this concept. Someone else had mentioned it in something completely separate from this, but when it was happening to me, I was really, really clear that that's what it was. And essentially what it was is for 10 days, I heard my subconscious yap, 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 and all of the worst possible things, all of the things that used to be true to me, like back in 2019, and before that, all of my insecurities, all of my doubts, all of my fears, all were like this, like just nonstop. Now remember, it happened to coincide with the worst physical state I've ever been in because I had that strain and because I was going through that, and it was also like almost 100 degrees in my apartment and the air conditioner had broken. Like it was a lot of things that just went down like in dominoes. But what it did is I started to, instead of getting mad, like to be beaten by it or like a fear tactic type of thing, I just kind of looked at it and I started listening to what it was saying. And I finally got to the point towards the end of between the sickness and between the birthday coming up and between the job ending. And I finally looked at my lower expression, my egoish sense of pride and kind of all of the more negative subconscious traits. It just was like, shut the fuck up, dude. And for whatever reason, it just empowered me. And I realized that it's something that happens during that process. You see, the concept behind the 10 days of darkness is that you basically go through the worst of your past in order to release it 100% in order to go into the new, is how it came across when it was all said and done. But just because it takes 10 days and that you're at the lowest part you can be in the physical, and then the mental thing happens, creating an X over you, you're the X factor of which only you can decide how it's going to play out. And so essentially it was the purification of that and the acknowledgement of whatever it was, whether you believe it was the devil or whether you believe it was my ego or my subconscious or whatever the fuck it was. You ultimately have the control to make it go away. But there are ramifications to the 10 days of darkness, not just the physical and then the mental. But then you have to process the information that was kicked up with the dirt from the tornado or whatever you want to call it that happens in your life. And you have to work through what was said and some of the things that you said in response outwardly, because words have power. So then you have to do what I call damage control until you realize that you need to have gone through it, because you can't be purified, you can't go through the purification process if you're not truly 100% honest with yourself. And sometimes it's not easy to look back at who you were, and it takes a minute for you to realize that it's not true for you anymore. And the only way to see that sometimes is that for other conditions and other factors to come at play that will make you have to look at it, because otherwise you wouldn't even know it was there. And so it was super important. But the melee, the next week and a half, of me working through what I call damage control, finally revealed something very interesting to me about the purification process. Is you never want to stand before the judge. You never want to stand before anybody when you're not 100% yourself and not 100% all caught up with yourself, meaning that you're not whole. You don't want to sit there and lie and pretend like you didn't know there was stuff under the surface that you needed to work through. And so by being kicked up, what I realized is that everything that I said needed to be said. That is a purification process. And so I had to become empowered with the fact that everything that happened during that period was meant to happen. Which immediately, for those of you who are paying attention and understand what I'm saying, immediately underplayed any type of dark energy that could have been attached to it, because immediately it dissipated and it no longer had any control over me. Because even under that concept, even if you don't take responsibility for yourself, the moment that you look at it from the state that it needed to happen in order for you to be stronger, more equipped, and better, then immediately any type of energy that was trying to attack you, if you will, or your subconscious mind trying to undermine you, no longer had any power over me. And that's super important for the mental portion of the purification. So what I will say to those of you who will be going through this, especially as we head into the next chapter, is understand that everything that happens always happens for a reason. And only you can take control of how you interpret it. Yes, it may be true, this thing concept about spiritual attacks and all that stuff, but only you can be open to it. When you become fully conscious of yourself and you become fully empowered with the ability to control your own life and your own emotional range, you understand that sometimes when you need to purge something, you need to experience the feelings that come with that. To really look at the devil in the eye and say, you have no power over me, so I'm going to walk through this valley and I'm going to do it with my head held as high as I can and with as much grace. So here's what I did, and this is important for those of you who are going to be going into this, because it's going to be the next wave is coming up before the end of the year. When the 10 days of darkness comes, it's going to be when you are feeling ill, when something has attacked the physical body, which is part of the physical purification. And what it is, it's basically any type of negative energy that's surrounding you is going to consistently bombard you with information over and over and over and over and over again on subconscious and sometimes conscious levels. And you're going to have to be able to identify your own voice within it so as to realize that it's not you or it's not the current you. Meaning, a lot of the banter, I mean, it was nonstop. It was already hard to sleep because I was sick as a dog. But the fact that it would not shut the hell up for like 10 days was really annoying. But most of the banter, I finally realized when I stopped trying to block it instead of just experienced it, was from the expression of myself in 2019. And that was very interesting because I was very conscious of the fact that 2019 and 2020 was a reset. And then I realized that there's another reset at 2025. And so once I listened and I actually processed it instead of running away from it, and I started to pay attention to what it was saying, I was able to ascertain that the old egoish expression, the victim, the person that went through 2019 and then went through the worst possible scenario for the whole COVID thing and all of that stuff that I went through, that egoish nature was dying, and I needed to let it go. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling because, there were a lot of people, places, and situations, memories that were attached to that particular time period that I thought were really, really great. But when it was all said and done, I realized that it was anchoring me to an old expression of self that just doesn't exist anymore. And the empowered person that I am was able to then look at all of that shit, go, get the fuck out of here. Because literally the conversation was really hysterical once I started to feel a little better and I started to realize exactly what was happening and kind of the merit for why I was going through such towers at that moment. And basically it was because I realized that I was completely in control of whether or not I actually absorbed what was coming out of me, right? Because you have to be willing to then pick and choose things that you hear and you have to reinvest it into your own body. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And so by putting it as myself, I was able to banish such thoughts in a way that was very healthy for me, which was I basically said to my ego, I'm like, you are responsible for every fucking problem I've ever had in my life. It's me. It's that undermining part of myself that doesn't believe in myself. You're that voice in my head that constantly tells me I'm not good enough, or I'm not handsome enough, or I'm going to be single forever, or all of the most insecurity, ways to manifest insecurity come from that lower egoish need to somehow be the victim. And I had to literally look at it and be like, there's traffic, go play in it. I'm so sick of listening to you down talk all of the best parts of this world and to make me feel like I'm not, you know what I mean? So it was a very strong, empowering moment, but I had to walk through the valley and face each shadow as it came. And because I wasn't feeling well, I wasn't able to turn away. I was literally having to face it for 10 fucking days and just it going. It just did not stop. And the reason I mentioned that it's important to know your own voice is because I also heard things that were not something I would ever say. And so I started to really, really play with the idea, well, I guess if someone knows that you are ascending, and what did they say in the Emerald Tablets? That once it's been made very clear, the hounds of hell chomp at the ankle. And I started to kind of really be tickled by that idea. I'm like, oh, you think that you can trick me into believing that it's my voice when I know myself? And so to I know myself be true. So it was one of those really interesting moments, but it was not pleasant. So please don't romanticize the experience. What I'm trying to tell you is feel it, work through it, do what you need to do in order to empower yourself to release it once and for all. Because whatever's on the other side of 2025 is going to require a great deal of strength and centeredness. Not self-centered behavior, I would say the complete opposite. You're going to have to be very giving and very community-driven. You're going to have to build bridges and you're going to have to help other people because you will have been the person that's purified. The others still haven't even gone into the initial stages of the purification. So, how did I get through it and what was revealed to me by the end of it? Heading into the spiritual cleansing, one of the things I realized is I suddenly felt something called being sealed. A seal had been placed. And I realized that what I was trying to work through was anything that opened a window or somehow left a door open that would be detrimental to me heading into whatever happens next. Now, I don't know who stays, who goes, whatever the process is that is for the higher realms. It has nothing to do with me. But I just know that it's going to take a great deal of resilience on the part of the collective in order to face its own shadow for the consequences to what it's done so far and how much hatred, intolerance, bullshit, and the most corruptive people and the most hypocritical people and all of the kind of the media that comes with events that are staged and all this stuff in order to garner sympathy. I mean, there's so much going on here that they think they're getting away with it. And what I'm supposed to remind you all is that no one ever gets away from the great architect because the great architect is every single one of them. Even in shadow, the architect stands in light and is very conscious of what everyone is doing. No one's getting away with anything. So for those of you who are understanding how important that sentence is, understand this. You too will have to go through the process, but you will have a fair advantage having been sealed and having gone through the vetting process. You will be the ones who stand as pillars and help other people because you won't suffer the same way that they may suffer in order to realign them properly for the new experience, whatever happens in the next epoch. This is the end run to something big. Now, sorry, it's so hot in here. It's summer, and you guys know I can't put the air conditioning on right now, so you're going to see me sweat a little bit. But essentially what I'd say is that you understand that each epoch was going to end, and it's just a transition. Whatever lays on the other side of it is not to be afraid of. That is so ridiculous. How can you be afraid of something that's out of your control? Instead, the best you can do is be best prepared. So, with the seal, what I can understand is that there is a lot of people who have been audited and who have gone before the judgment courts. And those people are now going through the last stages of the purification process in order to stand as pillars if they choose to stay behind and help the rest of the collective move forward. And I'm not mincing my words. If they choose to stay behind, they will stand as pillars. And so a lot of the symptoms and things that you are experiencing now, having been sealed, for those of you who understand what that means, is going to be a reduced expression of what they will be experiencing in the future. But you can't tell people that because they wouldn't listen to you anyway. How long have I been blowing this fucking horn? It's going to be 5 years in 2025. In 2017, 2018, I started writing books. I started working with my own process. And by 2019, we were specifically told we didn't know what was going to happen after the reset. And then 2020 hit and we went, oh, that's what they meant. Okay. And then we had to keep walking. But we kept going. We kept living, and a lot of us even thrived during that experience. So do not be afraid of 2025. It's just the consequences to what is happening now. And remember, those of you who are sealed, see through the facade and the bullshit of the play that's happening behind the scenes. And they're going to use that as a means in order to break you down as much as possible in order for you to be strengthened during the 10 days of darkness and during the process. So be advised that during that period, the best thing you can do is remember who you are and understand that what you're revisiting may be old expressions of you that need to go. And you need to release people, places, and situations attached to them that cannot come with you to where we're going. And again, just because there will be dire consequences to the worst of us does not mean that everyone has to pay the ultimate price that they will be paying in 2025. That is not our business. We are not part of that committee. We're not pointing out to other people where they did wrong, and we're not doing any of that shit. We're rising above it and walking in grace. So in order to walk with grace, you have to be really, really purified in your mental, physical, and spiritual shell. And the seal is just something that helps you understand when it's given to you, like crowned to you, whatever your verbology is. Verbology, I think that's a word. It sounds like some sort of thing, but I meant like your verbiage. Whatever your verbiage is in whatever house you come from, understand that when you receive the seal, it's just in order to help you be the pillar, if you choose to stay behind, that will help other people walk through the process, right? Because it is a new epoch. It's a new era. There's a lot that has gone on, a lot of bad karma that needs to be dished out for people who committed a lot of heinous things. And when all of that comes to light, it doesn't just affect one person. What do? They start to throw everyone under the bus. And all these people are about to fucking turn on each other and all this shit. And then you got the whole ridiculousness going on with the politics of it all. And you just need to realize that it is all there to put you under pressure. Right? And if you ever want to really understand the purpose of life, I want you to go back and listen to that Queen song, Under Pressure. And I want you to really understand what it is to become a divine being and what you have to overcome and thrive. Because some of what you'll be facing when you are done, for those of you who are part of this initial part that went through the 10 art, all of that stuff, they're going to be the pillars. You have to then decide to stay. You have to decide what is best for you, and that's something that only you, your guides, and your angels can deal with. That is not for me to say. I know how I feel. I also know how I will be voting, and it's something that's very specific to, I don't mean the human election. I don't care what about that. I'm talking about the cosmic election. I'm talking about the real things that matter, not the superfluous shit that's going on to distract you from the bigger things, right? Everybody's not looking at the signs. They're all avoiding what's really being seen. And so in 2025, it doesn't matter. Nobody will be able to avoid it, and everyone will be on their knees, and they will be understanding what this is all about. But until all of that happens, those of us who are leading into that have to make a very crucial decision by the end of this year. That has nothing to do with the cosmic election, nothing to do with the physical election, nothing to do with that. But it just has to do with, are you going to stay behind? Because through the collective, there is a big feeling of overwhelmment, and a lot of people feeling as though there is no hope. And so my message to you is very simple. Having gone through this process and having been able to then speak to it as best as I can without putting fear or without putting any type of my own personal bias into it, I will say this: there's always hope. And like I said when I began this whole piece, do not be afraid of things that have not played out yet. It is not written in stone. And the best thing I would advise every single one of you is to remember who you are and understand that you work for a divine energy that is known for miracles and for magic. And so don't write off the future without first experiencing what will happen next. So before you make that big decision, because even I'm facing a decision, do we stay or do we go? Before you make that decision, why don't you give the boss the benefit of the doubt that things that need to happen will happen by the time that we need to make the decision? There are still people that have not come together that are part of either divine unions or that are part of divine missions. And when those tribes and those clusters begin to crystallize and actually become formed into human expression, then anything can change at any given moment. And you cannot be distracted by all of the melee from the worst type of us who are trying to seize power. They won't win. This has already been, and you guys know this has already been resolved. This is the repercussions to the great war in the heavens. And this is the Ascension process, and it had to play out in the physical form in order for it to finally be one and done. And all of the beings that are the fallen ones that did not get the message and are avoiding the signs and who want to go down this path, they will face the consequences that come with that. But that is not your mission. Your mission is the general population, and will you stay and help them understand what they're going through and maybe help them transcend if they're not going to continue forward. And those are very big, heavy topics. But you can't tell people that at a regular interval and have them believe you. Only those who are really, really understanding and seeing the signs and really paying attention to what's going on will understand where we're at and how much hope there still is for the future. I cannot stress this enough. There are still people who are aware of each other in spiritual context and maybe in the ethers that have not yet crossed paths physically. And then when they do, it'll be done. It's done. You can't keep these people apart. And when they come together, a lot of great things will come out of it. One becomes two, becomes three, and a third thing may change everything. So do not give up yet. Watch what's happening, go through the process, trust the process, understand that it is getting rid of all the gunk and all of the insecurity and all of the doubts and all of the fears, and you're just going to have to face it. And don't hold back. If you are feeling something, just be very clear in how you word it. I don't know where this is coming from, but I just don't want to do this anymore. Stuff like that. Start with the truth, which is, I don't know where this is coming from. This is not, doesn't feel like me. And then your higher consciousness or your angels or whatever you believe in can kind of go, okay, we can help this. They're being auditive. I can hear them. All right. So what's happening? What's going on? And then it's kind of like, it's almost like therapy within thyself, but from a higher perspective, right? And if you need a therapist, go to a therapist. You know what I mean? Like, there's all these avenues to help you have a much stronger sense of mental strength and stability than just sitting in it by yourself. But for those of you who are on a master mission or going through the Ascension process, some of it will be dealt with in isolation. And you're going to have to be really, really clear as to what you're willing to put up with and what your boundaries are, because it's a reset. There's a lot that's going on behind the scenes that will play out that year. But we still need to tie up a lot of loose ends, and a lot of guilty people still have to be found guilty, and they have to do what they're going to do. They have to betray the boss. They have to do all the things that we know they're going to do, but they have to physically do it in order for us to seal it and go, ciao. And then we all can go on forward after that. But we don't deal with pointing it out. I really need this to be very clear. If someone makes a mistake, and if they advise people to do the wrong thing, who are you or me to point that out to another human being who is also in the academy as well as you are? Are you ready to have us all point out all the things you did wrong and all the bad advice you've given over your life? This is not the time to judge another human being, because you are indeed being judged yourself. And it's consequential what we say or what we put into the airwaves, into the ethers right now, because it doesn't just affect our world, it's a transitional point that's affecting a lot of different timelines. So be strong, speak from grace, speak from love and light, and unite the tribes. Bring the people towards each other. Work through your own shadow so as to help other people identify when they're facing their own shadow. But in order to do it, you need to be brutally honest sometimes with yourself and deal with the worst possible ideas and concepts that an old expression of you gave up on or that did something back in the day. If you're here on the planet, you have to work through karma. So if you're still here, then what is it? And if you're not willing to experience it and walk through that valley, then how are you ever going to accomplish your goal? Because then you then have to be able to help other people do it too. And when you go through this, for those of you who are ascenders, teachers dressed as students, you're not just transmuting your own energy. And part of your mission will be the transmutation of the collective's energy. And that's a heavy task. So understand that you also have to take care of yourself when this is going on. The reason I left my job, even though I don't have another one yet, is because I was physically being too demanded on it. I saved my money. I knew something was coming. I didn't know what it was. I'm fine. I'll be all right. I will get another job, but I needed to be able to just deal with it. So for those of you who are heading into this next phase, put money away. Stop overspending. It doesn't matter what the bureaucrats and liars and hypocrites are telling you about spend, spend, spend. Save, save, save. Because you're going to need a period of rest. And whether you do it now or whether you do it when it's happening, it's really important for you to be able to really, really listen to yourself in order to take the time needed to heal, because you will then be healing other people's energy. For those of you who are ascended healers. And that is incredibly draining. So then you have to fill your own cup before you speak. And that's what I've been doing. The reason why there was a delay between the last post I did and this one is because I needed to fill my own cup before I could fill anyone else's cup. And that took me having the bravery and the balls to just quit the job and know that I will find another job when it's time. Whatever it is going to work out. Everything is happening in exact divine order as it's meant to. So trust the process. Go through the shadow. Don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. Instead, face it. Just when you're facing it, verbalize it in a way that helps other energies that may be part of your life, your angels or whatever, your guides, or even your therapist, that help them understand that you don't know where it's coming from. And it helps you have a better sense of empowerment to identify what is yours and what someone else's, or whether it's something that does no longer exist, it's a past expression of you, or it's something that needs to be worked through now. This is all about self-awareness and being awakened to what the boss is trying to tell you. So do not be afraid of 2025, because we went through this in 2019. Those of you who are ascending, those of you who are very spiritual, knew that there was a reset in 2020. And when it hit, we went, oh, shit. Okay, well, at least now we know what it was. They weren't telling us. Just know that 2025 is like that. But the difference is we have garnered and gained knowledge and wisdom during the process, right? What we thought would be the end wasn't the end. It was just a transition. And a lot of things need to play out and are playing out that have negative consequences, because it needed to be shown and needed to be established what these individuals would do and if they would repeat the same process. Well, they did, and now they're going to face the consequences. But when they face the consequences, we have to then deal with the people that have nothing to do with those particular people, but who are affected by their actions. And we need to be there and help them transmute the energy, help them work through the shadow, and then for some to transition them to where they go on next. Because, some people give up. And we know what that's like. We know what it's like to give up. But we can't give up. There's too many variables that are still not known. So as I close this, what I'm going to say is go through this trusting the process and understand that ultimately there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. You cannot throw the towel in just yet, even though that is going to be the driving force behind the 10 days of darkness. I'm just telling you. It's going to be the bombardment of a voice that tells you, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I quit. Meanwhile, it's just your ego. And what do we know from theology? The ego is willing to kill itself in order to be right. We're above that. Let the ego kill itself if it wants to. Not us as the physical beings, but the lower ego, that subconscious part of you that's detrimental to you. If it wants to go down with the ship, as they say, then let it go down with the ship. You rise above it and go, all right, bitch, see ya. I'm going up. I don't know about you, but you can go down and descend into hell all you want. I'm the vessel. I'm going up. And have that resilience and that strength and that ability to look at it face forward. And you will be absolutely okay. Do not give up. Everything is exactly as it's going to be. And remember, the big guy has not even played his hand yet. So do not fear what is the unknown, because we've already been through it once. Going through it again should be a lot easier for us. So have strength, have hope, and above all, believe in miracles and magic, because anything can happen to change this just like that.